I'm 40 years old. My wife is 43. We've been married 10 years, together for 13. Two kids. And until a few nights ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life was. Let me start with the night everything cracked open. She told me she was going out to buy some stuff for the home. That alone should have been my first warning because my wife hates shopping for the house. She avoids it like it's a punishment. And she wasn't going alone. She was going with some male friend I'd never met. Never even heard her mentioned before. But here's the part that turned my stomach. She spent the entire day getting ready. Not getting ready like running errands. Getting ready like it was a date. The kind of effort I hadn't seen in a long, long time. After she left, something in me went cold and suspicious. I'm not a snoop. I've never been the jealous type. I don't object to her having male friends. I've never been controlling. But that day, something pulled me into our bedroom, and I started looking around. And that's when I found it. She'd put on the underwear she only ever wore for me. The ones meant for our bed, for us, for nobody else. She'd worn them out the door, for another man. I do all the childcare in our house, so I did what I always do. I fed the kids, I bathed them, I put them to bed. And she stayed out for hours. When she finally came home, I asked her about the man. She refused to tell me almost anything. The only thing she gave me was his first name. And then she said something I'll never forget. She told me that in order to stay in our marriage, she needed some time that was just for her. That first name stuck in my head. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd seen it before. It had been popping up in her texts for months. At the time, I never thought twice about it because it matched the name of a coworker she had. They'd message after hours about big projects all the time. Totally normal, or so I'd believed. But now I understood. She'd been slowly working up the courage to do this for a long time. It all suddenly made sense. For the last 2 months, our sex life had collapsed to nothing, zero. And she'd grown hostile, viciously, inexplicably hostile, for no reason I could ever name. It came out of nowhere. Just last week, she'd told me flat out that she didn't want to be married anymore, and that it had nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. What an outrageous thing to say. And before anyone decides I must have been a bad husband, let me tell you what I do. I do 100% of the childcare, all the shopping, all the housework. I work from home, even though she's the primary breadwinner. I'm emotionally available. I'm patient. I don't have a temper. I keep myself fit. I'm attractive enough. I'm not controlling. I never policed her friendships. And still, this screamed affair. I was utterly shattered. I felt like I was dying. I didn't even know how to talk to her about it. She'd been so angry for so long that just speaking to her had become a nightmare. I wanted to file for divorce. But filing for divorce meant breaking apart my children's home, and I couldn't decide which pain was worse. A few days later, we finally talked, and she told me everything. She admitted she'd been talking to this man for a while. She admitted she had intended to sleep with him. But when it came down to it, she found him so lacking, so disappointing, that she changed her mind. Apparently, the man had the nerve to have feelings. He wanted an actual relationship with her. So instead, she sat and talked with him, bought a piece of his art, and left. And no, she wasn't going to stop seeing him. She'd still hang out with him, she said. She just wasn't interested in him anymore. So I asked her directly, did she want an open relationship? She said yes. I asked her if we would ever have sex again. She said probably not. She told me she didn't want to be in a relationship with anyone, didn't want to sleep with anyone, didn't want any of it. But if she ever did decide she wanted to, she didn't want to feel caged, not after her recent disappointment. She wanted to keep our family together, but on her terms. So that was the deal I walked away with. A permanent hall pass. I would never have to explain where I'd been or who I was with, and she got the same. She called it fair. And God help me, I agreed. Because I couldn't force her to stay married, I couldn't force her to be faithful, and I didn't want a divorce. So just like that, we became roommates. Roommates with a lifetime contract and joint finances. And apparently I was now in an open marriage. I know a lot of people would say she was lying, but it sounded honest. And for the first time in months, she wasn't angry at me. She was direct. And the truth is, whether she physically cheated or not didn't even matter anymore, because she had intended to. She had emotionally checked out and given herself to someone else. The trust was gone either way. So I'd been right, sort of. And my marriage was over, sort of. And that, I told myself, is just how life goes. The next morning she came to me crying. She said she didn't know why she'd tried to destroy our life together. She said she loved me so much, that I was the perfect husband, that she had the perfect life, and that she just couldn't handle it, so she tried to burn it all down. She agreed to counseling. She said she didn't want to lose me, didn't want anyone else, and she'd do whatever it took for me to forgive her. She even offered to keep the marriage open only if I wanted to. She asked if I needed to see other people. I told her I didn't know. She said she understood, and she started crying again. Later that day, she tried to initiate sex. She was wearing those underwear again, the sexy ones. And seeing them on her made me physically sick, because she'd worn them for another man not even a week earlier, trying to end our marriage. I stopped her. Every wall inside me was up, all the way. The strangest part came that morning, getting the kids ready for school. She was suddenly affectionate with me, saying kind things. And the kids noticed. They were so happy in the car. My daughter looked at me and said, "I'm so glad Mom is being herself again. Isn't that great?" And I just said, "Yeah." I was so tired. That Friday she went out again. But this time she wasn't excited. She seemed heavy, pensive. She stayed out a little longer than usual, but came home at a reasonable hour. If I hadn't known what came before, I wouldn't have suspected a thing. I figured she'd broken it off with him. The next morning something shifted. She canceled everything. Every future date, every social plan wiped clean off her calendar. And she replaced it all with family activities. Just me, her, and the kids. She still wouldn't tell me a single thing about the man. So I decided to leave it alone for a while and gather my thoughts. We took a family trip. It was actually fun. She played the caring wife perfectly. Kind words, little messages sent from the other room, a hand on my arm. A dramatic shift from months of cold hostility. But I'd been burned too badly to trust any of it. So once I was calm enough, I decided to find out exactly who this man was. And with the help of a close friend, I did. She'd bought something from him. That single thread was enough to unravel everything. Who he was, how they met, how this whole thing began. I'll stay vague about the details for my own privacy. But here's what I learned. He followed her on social media, and she never followed him back. He never once posted on her page. She never liked or commented on anything of his. For complicated reasons, her account has a much larger following than a normal personal page, which made tracking him down an absolute nightmare. And when I finally saw him, I understood what he'd seen. He'd looked at my wife's page, full of pictures of our children, a couple of me, and only a handful of her. And somewhere in there, he'd looked at my kids and thought, I bet those kids would love 2 Christmases. That's the man my wife stepped out with, older than me by more than a decade, but very fit, very tall, like something out of a meme. And the worst part? She never blocked him, which meant it wasn't over. It was just on the back burner. So I made a decision. I wouldn't say a word. I didn't want her to just get better at hiding it. I wanted to see what was really going on while I quietly built my case. Not because I legally needed evidence, but because I needed to finish the puzzle. I needed to grieve it with my own eyes. I promised myself 2 things. First, I'd take care of myself and stay away from vices, because I could absolutely see a version of me getting drunk and high every single night over this, and I refused to become that man. Second, I'd keep my appointment with the divorce lawyer, just to understand my options. I couldn't actually file yet for complicated financial reasons, but I had zero trust left in my wife, and I never ever thought I'd be here. I hadn't dated in almost 15 years. I didn't even know how any of it worked anymore. I needed air, so I took a few days and drove to my parents' house. My wife stayed home with the kids. When my family heard what was happening, my sister came over too, and my parents made their positions clear. My mom thinks I should divorce. She already had several good divorce lawyers picked out, and honestly, she could barely hide how excited she was about the possibility. My dad, who's been married to her for decades, thinks we should work it out and offered to pay for any therapy any of us needed. Me, my wife, the kids, all of it. My mother said something that stuck with me. She said I always did like complicated relationships with difficult women. And then she said, "Your wife has been torturing you for months. Everyone's been so worried about you." And the awful thing is, that felt exactly right. My parents needed a ton of landscaping done, so my sister and I spent 2 solid days out in the yard, working and talking. The weather had finally turned nice. I got exercise, I got sun, I got surrounded by people who actually love me. And by the time I drove home, I'd nearly forgotten the whole nightmare. My wife greeted me at the door, genuinely excited to see me. And for one beautiful second, I let myself believe it. Happy kids, a smiling wife, a man coming home. It felt good. I was filthy and covered in dirt. I hadn't showered the whole time because my parents still share one single bar of soap like they did when I was a kid, and honestly, I'd rather stay dirty. So I went to change. Into the guest bedroom, where I live now. Not the room I used to share with my wife. And the second I walked in there, it all came flooding back. That deep, hollow ache. The reminder that the woman smiling at the door was a completely different person a week and a half ago, and could just as easily flip right back. So that's where we landed, a holding pattern. My wife watching me, wondering what I'll do, exhausting herself trying to be on her best behavior, and me just trying to hold my emotional state together long enough to get through each day in one piece. In the meantime, something unexpected started happening. I was getting attention, online, in real life, from women of every age group who seemed to really like who I am and how I look. I had no idea there was this much interest out there. So I decided I'd start going on dates in the coming weeks. I didn't know if it was a good idea. I didn't know if there was anything out there worth finding. But I knew that sitting in that house being sad was no kind of life. And my mom? She offered to babysit while I went out on dates. She doesn't even approve of dating while married. But if it nudges me closer to leaving my wife, she'll happily help. That woman is a trip. A few weeks passed. One weekend I went out dancing. Just me, alone, dancing with whoever crossed my path. I stayed out until 2 in the morning, and when I got home, my wife was waiting up. She pretended it was insomnia, but I could tell. She wanted to see when I'd come home, or if I'd come home at all. And here's the thing that genuinely confuses me. The more I do things purely for myself, the more she wants to be in this marriage. For years, I gave up everything to keep the family stable. Raised the kids, kept the house, never complained, never made it a thing. And it got me hostility. Now that I'm out doing impulsive, selfish, irresponsible things just for me, suddenly she likes me again. I still don't fully understand it. We started working hard on our communication, spending most of our downtime just trying to actually talk and understand each other. I was already in therapy and it was helping. My wife said she desperately needed therapy too, but worried her current therapist couldn't help her. Which is strange because her therapist is one of the best in the state and one of the only ones my wife actually respects. So she needs to give her another shot. A small problem now, maybe a big one later. I also insisted we untangle our finances. Separate accounts for each of us, equal money every month, one joint account for bills and another for vacations. For years, she drained the very accounts I was trying to build savings in, bankrolling her impulsive purchases. A quiet kind of financial abuse I was finally putting a stop to. And building my own account meant building a safety net, in case I ever decided to pull the trigger on divorce. The paperwork was ready. I just had to decide. Meanwhile, she was different, warmer. She told me she loved me regularly. Even the pitch of her voice had changed, higher, softer, more feminine around me than it had been in a year. a small, unmistakable sign that she found me attractive again. It felt nice. It just didn't land the way it used to. She was happier in general. She hadn't disrespected me or said a single cruel thing since her turnaround, which only proved what I'd suspected. She had been actively sabotaging this marriage. Because the moment she stopped, the house ran beautifully. It could always have been a happy home. She'd simply decided to make it a nightmare. I wasn't healed. Some of my sadness had curdled into resentment, which I knew wasn't good. Just being okay was harder than it sounds. She wanted us to finally take the honeymoon we never had. Back when we got married, we were too poor and too buried in raising two small kids to ever go. I think she was hoping to rekindle something. We'd see. I kept lifting weights, hard. Lost about 10 pounds of fat, put on muscle. Women I met out in the world started flirting with me aggressively. One night, a married couple my age actually tried to pick me up while I was out dancing. I entertained it for a moment, but my life was already more complicated than I wanted, and that felt like too big a bite to take so early into my little adventure. So I turned them down. Not definitively, though, we'd see. Then came Father's Day, and it was a nightmare. My wife had been getting angrier and more withdrawn in the days leading up to it. Then, first thing that morning, her mother called to remind her that her own father had abandoned them, and that she should celebrate her mother on Father's Day instead. My wife's response was to break down and take it all out on me, in front of the children, before retreating to her room. She apologized eventually. It wasn't the worst Father's Day ever. I got no gifts, no card, no kind words from her. But my kids hugged me over and over and told me how much they valued me. So that part was lovely. A couple of days before Father's Day, though, she'd dropped something on me. She told me she intended to actually take advantage of our open arrangement someday. She said, "I'm just not a monogamist like you are." I told her plainly that I wasn't interested in that kind of marriage. And she snapped back, "Well, I guess that makes me a slut. Are you going to stay married to a slut?" And I said, "I guess, for now." Then she hit me with the thing that reframed everything. She said, "Well, I thought you weren't monogamous either for a while." And there it was. She believed I had cheated on her. And because our communication had rotted so badly, instead of asking me, she decided to open the marriage as revenge, and then went out with that other man. She didn't bother to tell me any of this until after she'd already completely checked out, mentally and physically. It was a revenge affair. A revenge affair against a husband who had never once been unfaithful. That's why she'd turned around so dramatically. Somewhere along the way, she'd realized I'd never betrayed her at all. She still won't tell me what made her think I'd cheated. My best guess is the stretch of time I spent doing volunteer work. There's a lot buried in that, but the moment I pushed, the conversation collapsed, and she fled to her room again. And honestly, I don't think she even wants an open marriage. I think she had an affair, and now she's clinging to this open marriage idea to justify it to herself. I think she'd genuinely have another affair just to prove this is who she is, rather than admit the first one came from malice and insecurity, because everything in her behavior says otherwise. I go out on weekends, dancing, meeting people, talking, nothing more, and she stays up to see when I get home, eaten alive by jealousy the day before and the day after. If I were actually sexually involved with another woman, she wouldn't shrug. She would completely collapse. There was one more thing I noticed, and it told me everything about how much she still lies to me. About a week after the affair, she suddenly needed a doctor's visit for shots. Then, 6 weeks after that, exactly the timeline for an STD test and its follow-up, she went back for more shots. Different vaccines, she claimed. An unbelievable coincidence. And I'm not stupid enough to believe it. So I kept getting my ducks in a row. But it was an impossible bind. To protect myself, I had to keep my guard up. But keeping my guard up made healing the marriage impossible. Planning for divorce had become the most likely road to actually getting there. So that's probably the road I'm on. Still, my anger had largely burned off by then. I was starting to feel like myself again. And then, finally, Things broke in my favor. The man she'd had the affair with tried to reach out to her publicly on her social media. He was furious that she'd been ignoring his messages. She never blocked him, she just ghosted him. So he made the whole affair public. That was my breaking point. The affair itself was humiliating enough. Being publicly embarrassed on top of it was more than I could take. I know there's irony in that, given that I've been telling my own story. But I worked hard to stay anonymous. This was different. So I told my wife to leave for a week. I didn't care where she went. She wasn't welcome in the house. I told her she didn't appreciate me, didn't appreciate the work I did, the family I built around her, the life we'd made. And I wanted her to spend a week without all of it. I wanted her to feel exactly what the divorce would feel like. And here's the truth. It was one of the best weeks I'd had all year. I played with my kids without her chaos hanging over everything. I saw friends and family with nobody there to sabotage it. My stress dropped through the floor. I was happier. I was already as lonely as a man could be, so that part didn't change. But I didn't have to coordinate around a woman who changed her mind every 5 minutes. It was freeing. And the kids were calmer too. They said goodnight to their mom over the phone every night. I'd never keep them from their mother. They need both parents. But their stress visibly lifted. She stayed in a hotel and worked through the days. She even picked up extra weekend shifts, just to avoid sitting alone in that room with her free time. When she came home, she was extraordinarily affectionate, hugging me, which for her is deeply unusual. The next morning, she made me coffee and brought it to me in bed. She kissed me, told me what an amazing husband and father I am, told me how much she needed me, how much she'd missed me. She was apologetic in a way I'd never seen, and she finally agreed to start her own therapy. I know this will be a long road, full of ups and downs, but for the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. I was hitting the gym constantly, looking better than I had in years, and therapy was teaching me something important: how to figure out what I actually want, and how to stand up for myself. I deserve to be in a relationship where I feel loved and valued. And if this isn't that, then I need to give myself permission to leave. Not just for the kids, for me. Having my own needs is okay. That's the thing I still have to learn. So where does that leave me now? My wife and I are slowly, carefully rebuilding our communication. I've kept going out on my own, exercising like a man possessed. I honestly haven't looked this good in a decade. Out in the world, I get a stunning amount of attention. Young women asking for my Insta, which I've learned is how they tell you they're interested. But the marriage itself? It's either dead or on life support. And with neither of us truly fighting to keep it alive, I think it's just going to quietly fizzle out. For now, though, it works. As a practical arrangement, it actually works for both of us. I care for the kids, keep the house, cook, manage everything on the home front. She works and gets her downtime and her hobbies. We're both, in our own way, getting what we need. There's no real physical relationship left. But I don't want that with her anymore, so I don't feel neglected. And divorcing right now would wreck our finances at the exact moment we're finally getting on our feet. Staying actually works in my favor. The home is no longer a source of stress. I'm free to pursue other relationships. And every month I wait makes the eventual divorce better for me financially. So for now, I'm staying. The strangest part is that I don't really care that she cheated anymore. Or at least, I've stopped reacting to it. I learned the lesson. She isn't the person I imagined she was. I still love my wife, but that betrayal cut too deep. I don't want to do any of the husbandly things with her anymore. She's become something closer to a friend I happen to live with. Meanwhile, I've made a lot of new friends, thanks to my open marriage status. Turns out telling women you're married but available isn't a deal breaker at all. It's the opposite. And I'll be exploring that going forward. My wife doesn't seem to be pursuing anyone else, but I'm not keeping track. It just doesn't matter to me anymore. I'll say one more thing because it genuinely shocked me. The sheer number of women out there looking to cheat on their husbands is staggering. Don't worry, I'd never be a part of that kind of hurt. But it's everywhere. And it's always the same story. They're bored. Their life is stable. They want a spark. The exact words my wife could have said. Go talk to your husband. Work through it. Don't go destroy your family chasing a stranger in a nightclub. My trust in people took a real beating learning all this. But me? My mental health is solid now. Weekly therapy. My body's in the best shape it's been in years. And peace, actual peace, is slowly coming back into my life. My kids are happy. We've spent the whole summer playing sports, gaming, traveling, gardening. They love that their parents finally get along, that their mom isn't angry all the time, that their dad no longer looks like he's about to collapse from stress. I don't have much hope that the marriage can truly be saved. But right now it's a shelter, a place where I can rest, gather my thoughts, and quietly build the life I actually want. And after everything, the betrayal, the lies, the nightmare of those first 3 days, I can finally say it and mean it. I'm doing okay.